Grom the Paunch, or Grom the Fat depending who you speak to, was a mighty war boss whose infamous brutality is still remembered to this day. Now you may ask yourself why this war boss is so well known throughout history. Many have risen and faded away, and many will do long after. What made Grom so interesting to the many races in the world was the fact that Grom was no orc. Grom was a goblin. While it is true that goblins do tend to rise to rule tribes and even lead sizable hordes, Grom has led massive armies throughout the world into bloody conflicts, to the point that Grom has become a legend. Being the only greenskin to lead a successful invasion of Ulthuan, many war bosses aspire to rise to even a fraction of Grom's greatness. So without further ado, let's begin. Grom was but a simple goblin war boss, one of the various leaders of a small tribe known as the Broken Axe tribe. As can be expected, he wasn't anything special, for goblins are cowardly leaders. But despite the loyalties of his fellow goblins, he managed to survive for quite some time, often ordering his fellow tribesmen to do what was expected of greenskins: destroy and pillage. In truth, it wasn't until one fateful day where Grom's true path of infamy would finally show itself to him. For on this day, Grom would ingest raw troll meat. As we all know, troll meat should always be cooked, for trolls possess rather strong regenerative abilities. The meat began to grow within Grom's stomach, and luckily for him, he was able to digest almost as quickly as it grew. A lesser goblin, and indeed maybe even a lesser orc, would not have been able to do so, with eventually the greenskin bursting under his newfound weight. But Grom was lucky. With the troll meat ever growing inside his belly, he grew to a gigantic size, so much so that his growing would mark the last time he would be able to see his own legs, and now due to his sheer weight, he would have to take to fighting atop a chariot. And so would begin Grom's legend. As was common with greenskin biology, the bigger he got, the more ambitious he became, eventually rising to take over the Broken Axe tribe fully, as many goblins flocked to his sides. For they respected the so-called Dagraitan, as they had never known for one of their kind to grow to such a size, and believed he was destined not just for greatness, but to lead the goblins into an age where they would be feared just like their bigger kin. Within the year, Grom's size was almost that of an orc. He was not as well built as a typical greenskin, lacking their natural muscles, but he was fatter, and with that, he made a name for himself. Grom had his ever-growing hordes of goblins, and now it was time to test his army against a larger foe. Since the dawn of greenskin history, the goblins have mostly served orcs, for their larger cousins have no respect for them, seeing them more as a little nuisance. While indeed they were useful to some degree, the goblins were sneaky and mostly skulked within the shadows. They were not true greenskins. This is exactly what Zoc Gutstabber, the orc war boss of the Gutstabber tribe, fought, as he subdued many goblin tribes and treated them no more better than slaves. Zoc's forces were swelling, and soon enough the Broken Axe tribe would find themselves enslaved too unless they ran. At least, that's what the lesser goblins would think. Grom, on the other hand, would not be bullied by some random war boss. While his forces would stay back, Grom, with a confidence unlike any goblin, strode forth by himself to meet the orcs. Zoc had heard of this rather large goblin, and thought he may be up for some entertainment, demanding his boys stand back and let the seemingly suicidal goblin pass, so he may teach him a lesson. Grom walked confidently into Zoc's camp, and was greeted by the sight of the greenskins making a circle, which could only mean one thing: a duel. The battle was hard but short, for Zoc did manage to land a normally killing blow on Grom, burying his cleaver onto him. However, the troll flesh that Grom had consumed had altered his body, where he too would now regenerate, and the otherwise killing blow would now be ignored. Zoc, on the other hand, did not have these abilities, and was quickly slain by Grom. Zoc now lay dead, and the Gutstabber big bosses now saw an opportunity to rule, so they lunged forward at Grom, hoping he would be weak after the duel. One by one, each boss was slain, as Grom would regenerate any wounds he would take, and quickly go on the offensive once again. Soon enough, the gut stabbers would be shattered, and Grom sitting exhausted but proudly over their corpses. It was here that Grom found the lowly night goblin, who managed to survive the onslaught. Grom thought this was a sign of good fortune, given how the night goblin managed to survive despite the carnage, and commanded the gobbo to henceforth carry his standard. The night goblin was named Niblet, and he has been with Grom ever since. Grom's tribe absorbed the Gutstabber tribe, and many others during the following years as he led his horde, which by now had grown into a full-blown greenskin war, into a path of destruction. Dwarf hordes would be sacked, some outright destroyed, and Grom, being the ever sadist that he was, threw the biggest insult he possibly could to the dwarfs, where a statue of the Dawi god Grungi was altered and damaged to take on the appearance of Grom himself. Naturally, this enraged the Dawi, who sent many a throng to deal with the greenskin invaders in an attempt to repel or destroy them. Sadly, however, Grom and his forces were massive, and no matter how many dwarf veterans came to deal with the greenskins, the orcs and goblins would fight back, and send the Dawi back to their remaining holds. The losses Grom's armies would take would prove insignificant, as more and more tribes, especially goblin tribes, came to join the mighty fat warboss in his quest to ruin all which stood in his way. The Dawi were naturally worried about the ever-growing masses of green filth, and sent requests for aid from their ancient allies, the Empire. Unfortunately for them, the reigning emperor at the time was selfish and cared only about his own safety. Aid would not come to the Dawi, and therefore the greenskins had free rein to continue their rampage. Seeing no other alternative, the Dawi shut themselves in their mountain holds, waiting for the mighty war to come to them. The greenskins raged through the mountains, attacking and destroying many Dawi holds, but unfortunately for them, never one of the major ones. The Dawi fought valiantly, and did manage to hold back the hordes, but the longer they fought, the more Grom's fame grew, and hundreds of thousands of goblins would flock to his side. With his numbers swelling beyond the capacity of the mountains, Grom turned his attentions to the Old World, where the Empire had been mainly undisturbed during the past few years. The Empire found itself with little preparation, which is rather daft considering they knew of the threat that would eventually turn to them. Many peasants were forced to flee to the safety of the heavily fortified cities as the countrysides and forests of the Empire became infested with goblins. The lesser defended cities would soon enough be subject to mighty sieges as greenskins threw themselves at battlements to destroy any who stood in their path. Grom would lead his forces to many victories in the Empire. His biggest was that of the sacking of Null, which had long been considered the jewel of the Empire. Many riches lay within this city, and Grom wanted it all. With Null now under his control, Grom was more interested in the untold treasures of the city, and did not pay attention to his forces thinly spreading across the Empire to do as they willed. They would have shattered the Empire eventually, would Grom not have been shown a world with more treasures by his shaman. Take to Dasi, he was told. Gork and Mork want new lands to crush. Grom knew better than to upset the gods, especially since he believed that his abilities were gifted to him by them. Gathering what little forces remained around him, he set off, shattering many imperial cities as he moved. The magnificent city of Middenheim, and indeed most of the province of Middenland, found itself shattered. Grom himself almost met his end, where a cannonball had destroyed his chariot and nearly taken him to Gork and Mork. But Grom was unexpectedly lucky, and quickly demanded a new chariot to be built to support his obese frame. Unsurprisingly, the chariot was named exactly the same as the last one, the Chariot of Grom. This minor setback would not stop Grom for long, for the coastal province of Nordland was just a few days away, and it was home to many ships ripe for the taking. Nordland itself would put up a fight, but its warriors were no match for the might of the greenskin horde that enveloped the land. Many ships Buildings and forests were salvaged as the Greenskins began to build a crude but terrifying fleet in the name of Grom the Paunch. Many of the Greenskins, especially the Orcs and Black Orcs who had joined Grom's hordes, protested. They were fighters, not builders, but Grom would slay them if they complained. None would deny Grom's wishes, for Grom was doing the will of the gods. West was his destination, and west they will go. A crude but mighty fleet was built in Grom's name in the course of a few months. Nothing too spectacular, but enough to serve its purpose. The many Imperial ships that caught sight of the Greenskins decided that it would be best to stay clear. After all, it looked like they were sailing away from the Empire, and it would be best not to tempt them to another fight. It was only when the Greenskins were getting too close to the Imperial capital when battle had to be joined. Even at sea, Grom's command was unwavering, where Imperial ships were destroyed without mercy. Surely the Imperial capital of Reichland or the free city of Marienburg would have been next, would the weather not have changed. With many Greenskin ships now sinking, Grom was left with no other alternative than to carry on his journey west. The weather did not improve as they sailed past Bretonnia, where more ships lost their course and were lost in the nearby beaches. Grom's numbers had taken heavy losses, but the war boss would not stop his quest. In his eyes, he was unstoppable, and none could deny the big-headedness of a war boss with many victories under his boot. Over the horizon was the coast of Ulthuan, the lands many have tried to invade but failed. Grom saw this as a challenge. Surely this is where Gork and Mork wished them to be. The pointy ears were powerful, but what were they if not the next victims of Grom the Paunch? Hundreds beyond hundreds of Greenskins docked within the eastern coastlines of the High Elven continent, with each ship then stripped to fashion war machines and yet another chariot for Grom. They had managed to bypass the magical and monstrous defenses within Ulthuan seas. Many believe that such a high concentration of orcs, further empowering their shamans, negated the magics of even the most talented of High Elf casters. The High Elves took notice of the fleet arriving to their shores uninvited, and very quickly sent a number of forces to repel the Greenskins before they could bunker down within the shores. Unfortunately for the High Elves, they were incredibly outnumbered, and Grom was all too aware of this. He ordered his forces to charge forth and destroy any cities who lay within eyesight and slaughter every pointy ear that tried to run. Grom took the advice of his shaman, who had been feeding on the magical energies of the regions the mighty hordes fell through. Eventually driven to madness, but still Grom trusted the speaker of the gods. More cities fell, more riches gained, and more pointy ears being taught who was the biggest war boss in the world. None of these small cities would prove Grom's real worth, however, and he wanted a challenge. His shaman, in a maddened state, pointed, and Grom knew this is exactly what he'd been looking for there stood a towering elven city, Dorires, a city of great beauty, an ancient city which, despite all the horrors which Ulthuan had seen over the many years, still stood proudly. This was his challenge. Surely a great city held many pointy ears to slay, and hopefully they would provide a good fight. With great confidence, Grom yelled for his armies to charge and break themselves upon the walls of the great elven city. Orcs and goblins charged as mighty and brutish siege machines hit the walls and gates of the great city. The elves met the Greenskins with kind, riding out to meet the invaders and to hold them, but they were met with a sea of green, and could not hold as so many goblins flooded the city streets, and many civilians were put to the blade. Flames rose, statues were destroyed, and the screaming of many could be heard as they were executed. Blacktooth, Grom's shaman, had truly lost himself to madness, as he prepared himself to absorb more magical energies and eventually sink Ulthuan into the seas. Thankfully for the elves, and in truth the whole world, Ulthuan was saved by the timely arrival of Elfarion the Grim, who beheaded Blacktooth and led a mighty war host to meet the Greenskins in battle. Even Grom and his mighty horde were no match for Elfarion's furious warriors, who fought with hatred that only the Grim himself could muster. The goblins, now no longer being empowered by their mad shaman, broke and fled as they were chased down and killed. Grom himself tried to rally his forces, but it was no use. They would not listen, and eventually he too had to flee. It has been many years since Grom's invasion of Ulthuan, and indeed it has been many years since anyone has actually seen Grom the Paunch. But there are rumours still persisting that the Fat Goblin is still alive, and he is amassing an even larger force to once again invade Ulthuan and take his revenge on the Grim. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our lore video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.